My journey has not been in a kind of straightforward line. I started my career in corporate finance back in America, and I had a dream of becoming a whiskey maker and a whiskey blender. And I quit my role in finance and moved to Edinburgh. Did postgraduate studies, master's in brewing and distilling at Heriot-Watt, and then had various roles with Scottish and Newcastle, and then Heineken, literally as a technical manager for Western Europe. And then an opportunity opened up finally in whiskey blending with not one, but actually 3 companies at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And I took the opportunity with Macallan as a whiskey maker up at Easter Elke's house. And then started my journey on maturation. I've always been fascinated. Even before I joined Macallan, I was always fascinated with sherry cask and sherry cask matured whiskies. So that has always been a passion. And that was one of the reasons of selecting Macallan compared to the other opportunity I got in blending, which is equally an amazing company. And I started working there. Then I moved to Glasgow, Great Western Road, work on different projects with different brands as well from Edrington portfolio. And our then ex-chairman, Dr. Alan Rutherford, called me up and said, come down and have a look at Lakes, project that he was involved in. And I came down for a cup of coffee on a weekend. And long story short, I started with Lakes in 2016. So I started initially just in the role of the blender for the company. And in 2017, I took over the whiskey operation side of things. So that includes everything to do with whiskey, gin, vodka, anything to do with production operations. At the same time, I'm the blender for the company as well. So I'm the whiskey maker looking at from a holistic perspective, all the way from raw materials intake, all the way till the final bottle gets bottled and off to our lovely customers and consumers like you. So that's my remit in a very, very short, but I'll be open to a lot of questions. I'm sure you might have questions about the products, the brand, and we can talk more about it. But thank you.
Yes. And when did the Lakes Distillery, when did it start? When was it founded?
So Lakes Distillery was founded in 2011, but we started distilling in 2014 December. So that's when the first distillery started flowing. But as a new distillery, we are always on a constant journey of evolution, where you constantly understand what the character have to define a house style. Because you can have, a new mixed spirit that doesn't kind of individually stand on its own, but we have to have a style that people who drink the Lakes single malt would recognize. And that's the process that I started in 2017. And I call it, it's a very typical term called the rationalization of new mixed spirit. So basically you look at the spirit you have and you try to understand the parameters. What can you tweak there? How can you push? Can you make it more fruity? Can you make it more heavy? Can you make it more cereal character? So that's the process we started in 2017. And we completely revamped the new mixed spirit from ground up. In a way, we wrote the rule book again. We modified the systems. That the distillery had major changes from a capex perspective, equipment perspective, everything from all the way from mashing all the way to maturation was completely sort of evolved to completely fit with the new mixed spirit that the distillery wanted to create, rather than us forcing a certain character on a distillery. But we can talk more about it again.
Yes, no, I'm so interested in the distillation process because it's quite unusual. I mean, not just the distillation process, the whole alcohol production thing. It's very, very involved what you do. And do you want to go into that now, or would you prefer to have some whiskey first and then tell me a little bit about it?
I don't know about you, but I definitely would love some whiskey first. So why don't we talk about the whiskey first, and then we can open up to questions and anything I don't know everything, but if I can answer, I'll definitely answer everything.
Well, you know more than me. So let's try the the Miramar, which was the Master of Malt exclusive, which sold out in about 45 minutes. So if you've got a bottle, you are extremely lucky.
So this is Lake's Distillery Whiskey Makers Editions Miramar. And I think one of the first fundamental things that we can talk about is there are two different avenues or two different platforms for the single malt whiskeys at Lake's. One is the Whiskey Makers Reserve, which is our house style, sherry-led, wood-forward, flavor-packed, kind of a little sherry monster in a bottle. And the second one is the Whiskey Makers Editions range. Whiskey Makers Editions are a diversions from a house style. Now, while this one is focused exclusively on sherry cask and maturation and quite an intense sherry character, the Whiskey Makers Editions focus more on the blending, more on élevage, more on the flavors that you can play around through blending, create, enhance, and contrast. So this is more about the blending and élevage, while because Reserve is more about the sherry cask and maturation and how do you enhance those characters. So let's talk about the Whiskey Makers Reserve Miramar. Miramar is quite a special whiskey for me because one of the personal stories is the Miramar was the first restaurant where I tried my first whiskey when I was a teenager. So it brings up a lot of memories. It was on the beach at the restaurant as well. And Miramar is all about bringing a very expansive character, very lively, easygoing, laid-back character. It's more about conversational. It's more about, relaxed mood. It's not very intense like you see the Whiskey Makers Reserve. It's quite relaxed, quite laid back. So if I think Whiskey Makers Reserve is wearing a suit, this is wearing jeans and T-shirts, and it's quite lively. For the nose, if you have it in front of you for the lucky ones, or you might be still on its way, but so beautiful. I get, I love Morello cherries and Santa Rosa plums. And those are the characters that I wanted to highlight. But I wanted to also bring in a restrained elegance, a more perfumed elegance using American oak cask as well. So this is a combination of different port types and also different American oak types and different American oak casks. And I know it sounds very simple, but it's quite complicated in the makeup. Even though it's only 600 bottles exclusive to Master of Malt, I start with a process called élevage. And élevage is something that I have taken from the cognac and brandy makers. And it's a process where you have constant involvement in how the whiskey is aging, how the whiskey is developing. You nurture it. And it means moving liquid from one cask to the other to layer different flavors. So even though it says port pipes and ex-bourbon cask, but there are probably over 50 different casks involved in the whole makeup, because you start with, let's say, we'll break it down, right? So it's like a Lego blocks. So every Lego block is a different style of character that I get from a different cask. So for example, let's take ex-bourbon cask. There might be particular casks which might be very intensified on a vanilla note, or you might get a lot of vanilla cream character. There might be some casks that might be getting me more tropical fruit characters, coconuts, pineapples. You might have casks that are getting more citrus characters as well, orange peel, lemon blended together in élevage, and they have been moved around in cask to layer all the different flavors. And then on the other side, the other component was all about the port. So this is not a port finish whiskey or anything. This is completely matured in port, which has been moved around in different ports. So you have, ruby port, you have tawny port, and you have port pipes, and those have been completely blended to create a harmonious flavor profile. So what I wanted to experiment was trying to take all these rustic characters of plum wine, Santa Rosa plums, and then combine them with tropical fruit characters of vanilla. You also get a lot of coconuts. You also get a lot of mangoes coming through. So those have been combined through the art of blending and élevage. And that's the result is Miramar. So I hope when you get your bottles, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I have done making it. So
cheers.
Cheers, Henry.
It's so delicious. It's just, as you said, it's one that's just joyful, great fun, really, really delicious whiskey with those cherries and the toffee and vanilla. It's just really lovely balance to it.
Absolutely. And, it's so versatile. And when I say expansive in terms of the flavor possibilities, and also versatile in terms of lot of ways you can drink it. And, right now I'm having it neat, but I had it a highball as well over the weekend. It's amazing. And it's, just enjoy the way you please. I don't recommend drinking in a certain way, or add water, add ice, mix it up with cocktails. But that's the beauty of the whiskey, because it has all this two polar opposite flavor profiles. You are talking about rustic characters, and you are talking about very vibrant, fruity characters, and they are kind of, fuse them through the process of élevage. So that's Whiskey Maker's Edition Miramar for you.
And it's bottled at quite a high alcohol, isn't it? 54%.
Yeah, it's 54%, and I think for people who kind of know the way I make whiskey is I'll do a prototype, and something I'll be working here. So once the prototype is ready, I don't do it based on a calculator or an accounting principle. I will actually look at the spectrum of different flavor profiles that I can achieve through just changing the strength. And because by changing the strength, you also have, compounds that love alcohol and compounds that love hate water or love water. So you have different aromas of the liquid. So I will start with a cask strength all the way till 46.6. That's as low as I will get. And then I'll pick up the strength which will give the best flavor profile, what I had in mind when I started creating this whiskey. So this was 54, and I think it tastes the best at 54. And I can do it.
Lovely.
Sorry.
No, I just think lovely. It works beautifully at 54. I just put a tiny drop of water in. It kind of opens it out a bit, but I love the high alcohol, which also makes it great for cocktails as well. For mixing and things. Do you want that high alcohol?
Absolutely. And I think, one of the, things I like about Miramar is it has this, Morello cherries, and then you have this Santa Rosa plums. But that underlying backbone is a good toasted cereal character. So you have the cereal character with those plums. So it's like a porridge, that you eat in the morning, just fresh food.
Yeah.
But it's very, very laid back. While you have to, there are times when you need whiskey where you want to give yourself to it. You have to give time. You have to understand it, let it open up, spend time with it while reading a book throughout the evening. Well, this one, blends in easily. It gets to you. It's easy. It's laid back. It's like a friend, you don't meet very often, but once you meet, you constantly, you immediately get to know them, and you just kind of, back to normal. It's that easygoing. So that's what I love about it.
That's such a good way to describe it. Now, I'm very interested in, how would you describe the character of your new make?
So that's a very good question, but I don't have a very simple answer, unfortunately.
Well, we've got all night.
The new make has been completely redefined. Like I said, I started working in 2017 to completely change the new make spirit. And that process took time. So we have our core new make spirit called AR1, that's named after our ex-chairman, Ellen Rutherford, the gentleman who got me here from Macallan. And AR1 is our primary new make spirit. We call it super estery, medium-bodied, creamy with a slight bit of waxy texture to it. So that's our core fermenter, but we also have two supporting new makes. One new make is called AR1 Heavy, which is our meaty, sulfury new make, which has a lot of characters of leather, sulfur. Those characters are very good for long-term maturation. Also, they give a lot of complexity and heaviness, body structure to the fine component parts, right? So AR1 is our primary new make. That's the bread and butter, or the very center of new make. But then you have AR1 peated as well. This is a very gently peated new make spirit, which allows you to give you depth and complexity of the character. So when you actually nose it, it is very gently peated, but it gives you complexity. Now, all these three new makes form part of the Lake single malt portfolio. So they give the complexity, the depth, the dimensions, and also they have different cask makeups as well. So AR1 Heavy goes into different casks, AR1, the foundation goes into different casks to bring out those characters. So one is a super ester light spirit, one is a meaty, sulfury, heavy spirit, and the other one is a gently peated spirit.
It's fascinating. It's like you have sort of three distilleries on one premises.
Yes, absolutely. And I think those all changes have been made throughout the process. At the same time, we also have two different condensers. We have stainless steel condensers and copper condensers. So AR1 Heavy, which is our meaty spirit, that's made use of our stainless steel condensers. But ultimately, it's all about not to create three different new make styles or everything. Everything will be under the Whiskey Maker's Reserve, Whiskey Maker's Additions. But those three new make spirit work together in harmony to allow you to create all these complex flavor profiles. Just like when you look at our cask and maturation, we use all different kinds of oaks. We have different sizes of cask, but we have, primary oaks we use are American, Spanish, and French, and we use, PX, Oloroso, and Fino cask. So those three create a lot of complex combinations. And that's the same way the new make spirit also create different combinations. So this new make spirit can be blended before even it goes into the cask. They're also blended after the maturation period as well.
Right. Okay. So you sometimes blend the new make before it goes into the cask?
Yes, absolutely. Because I think I didn't touch on that. Now, if you drill down AR1 further, forget about AR1 peated and AR1 heavy on the side. If you just look at AR1, AR1 is made using three different yeast profiles. So one is the classic M strain. Then we have also a heritage yeast, which gives us a classic, waxy, creamy character. And then also we have a French yeast that we use in our makeup. So the three yeast make the AR1, and they are fermented differently to make the AR1 core component. And then we have three different new makes having different yeast profiles, different cut points, different complex system. But in a way, we don't want to, I can go, create 10 different new makes, but then it's complex. Sometimes you have to stop, and sometimes you have to say, okay, that's enough, because three gives me enough combinations to play around and create a lot of complex different flavor profiles.
So, this is a kind of whiskey nerd's dream, isn't it? So you've got three types of yeast, and those are fermented separately then. So you have three separate washes.
Yeah, depending on the new make spirit, they are either added together at different times in the same wash bag, or they are fermented differently and then they are blended together. We have a custom design tank as well, where all the liquid new make spirit from the week is blended together to create a harmonious flavor profile. And then it goes into cask. And the cask is also It can be different depending on what character I'm looking for. It can be starting with 63%, or it can go as low as 54% as well for the cask filling strength I'm talking about.
Right. Well, if anyone has any questions, if you comment, then they get to me and I will ask. So I'm sure there's lots of people who've got questions, because it is a fascinating process. And just one more question about the fermentation. You do long ferments, don't you?
Yes. We have, yes, I mean, there are people who ferment much longer than us as well. But for us, all the trials that I did, we do 96 hours fermentation. And 96 gives us a good balance of the character I'm looking for, from an estery profile all the way to a little bit of a creamy yogurty texture due to the malolactic fermentation. So I get that 96 hours is the fermentation for all our spirits. That's a minimum fermentation time. Excuse me.
Is it unusual for it to undergo malolactic fermentation, which that makes it creamy, doesn't it?
Yeah, so sort of, rather than creamy, I would describe it as sort of yogurty texture that you get.
Right. Yeah.
And also, I think it balances us out. We did a lot of trials, looking at different fermentation times for different yeast. Doesn't mean every yeast profile that we'll use will have the same impact on the final new make, but for the makeup that we have, we found 96 was good balance between what we wanted to create. So yeah, we push it quite hard from a fermentation perspective. We also have a clear wort. So when we do the mashing, we have a clear wort, and it's not clear as a lager, but somewhere kind of between a lager and a Hefeweizen. And so for the clear wort also gives us a lot of fruity characters coming through. So wort, and then depending on the type of new make spirit, whether it's AR1 heavy or AR1 classic, we change the distillation profile as well. So the stills are run quite slowly for AR1, allowed more copper contact. It allows us to get much more fruitier character, and everything is on stainless steel copper condenser. And for AR1 heavy, the stills are run slightly faster, less copper contact, but at the same time, the main difference happens when we swap it to stainless steel condensers, and that gives us a much more heavier, meatier spirit. And it's great, yeah.
And this is wonderful, because we haven't even got to the casks yet, and already you've got so much. I mean, how do you keep track of it all? You must have spreadsheets and database, just to keep track of all these, different elements you have to play with.
No, absolutely. The complexity of the final blend, it's all in my head. That's how I function. I thrive in complexity. I thrive in chaos. And that's something I don't know why. It's a blessing. It comes naturally to me. But yes, I have a very, very strong team behind me who keep a track of. We have, different spreadsheet to monitor everything, because there are so many different parameters. And as you will, appreciate that whiskey making is an additive process. Even though a lot of people say, oh, it's all about the yeast, it's all about the malt, or it's about the cask. No, it's about everything. It's about how everything fits into the other and how we can interlink all those flavor profiles. Now, the job of, or the probably, I would say, the responsibility or obligation of a whiskey maker is to understand the style that the distillery wants to create, and understand the points where the flavors can be enhanced, can be subdued. And that's the whole, that's my job, to understand from all the way from raw materials, all the way till cask, how do they kind of play around. But the fun part for me, and I'm a student of sherry cask, for me, it's all about cask. And I use that complexity. We create the new make spirit, but everything is designed to work with a certain cask. And when I'm talking about cask, and we just don't say sherry cask, we have number of different sherry casks. And I'm not talking about the styles of sherry, but also different specification, different casks, different profiles, different sizes, different seasoning times, different types of bodega casks, seasoned casks. They all impart a different character. They give you a color, a shade of a character. Think about this as a palette, artist palette, and they all give me different shades, and then I can play around with them through the blending process or through élevage process. And that's where the fun, and that's where things like Miramar come into existence, where whiskey makers additions come in. If you know, the first one was Kolita, then we had Lagute, now this one is Miramar. They all are expressions of creative freedom. And something I say very often, that everything I do, I try to express ideas, emotions, thoughts, feelings through the language of whiskey. And that's just my way of kind of communicating my emotions through the liquid.
Well, I feel like all this talk of sherry casks, I think maybe we should try the Whiskey Maker's Reserve, don't you?
Yes, absolutely.
So this is the sherry monster.
Yes, absolutely. So but a sherry monster that has been tamed. It's elegant. It's elegant. It's complex. It has layers and layers of flavors. If you compare both of them, it's so different, night and day difference. Yeah. One is driven by a lot of lighter, those rustic characters. This is all about kind of sort of blending and élevage and how do you showcase different flavor profiles. And this one is about the complexity that you can get in sherry cask. And it's not just a standard, okay, we fill in PX and bottle it after 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. This has combination of different casks. This has Oloroso, this has PX, this has cream sherry, this has red wine cask. And all those casks are used as a component part. I use that analogy quite often of a Lego brick. So they are all different Lego bricks. And there can be millions of combinations how you place Lego bricks together. And that's what Whiskey Maker's Reserve is.
I love the nose. You get that incredible kind of sort of rum, dried fruit, that rich sherried character, which is so, it just, I think I'm like you. I love sherry cask.
Absolutely. And I think this kind of brings up all those sweet profiles as well. And to be honest, I've kind of restrained PX quite a bit because PX I use only for textural changes. But mostly it's Oloroso driven. Every single, I always believe fundamentally that for a great sherry cask whiskey, Oloroso has to be the backbone where you build upon it. But that red wine cask, they bring you those berries. These blackcurrant flavors. Then I get also toasted cashews. I love those flavors. And figs. And of course, it has this perfumed elegance to it as well. There's a lot of honeyed character coming through as well. It's rich. I think they both are so different, but yet so much alike. When you actually try both of them, you feel that they're part of the same family, even though they are two different individuals. And that's what you can do with just blending. A lot of people just talk about focusing on new making. Absolutely. I love a lot of whiskeys who are very, distillate driven, but I think there is much more fun on trying to create different flavor profiles and play with fusing different characters and flavors just by kind of playing around with oak. And it's a tune, I just use this as like a trumpet or a saxophone, and the cask are the saxophone, and you just play the different tunes through it. And that's what I like about it.
No, it's wonderful. Wonderful. And this one is one of your core products, and you blend it so it's consistent to taste like.
Yeah, so consistent, and again, I want to highlight that the Whiskey Makers Reserve has different numbers through it. Okay, so as a distillery, we are on a journey, but every single edition has some interpretation for me. So I keep the DNA the same, the flavor profile, the finish, everything has the same DNA, but they have a slightly different variance. It's like four kids growing up in the same household. They're from the same parents. They kind of sort of look alike, but they have their own individual characters. One is interested in arts, and one is interested in kind of music, and one is into science and engineering. So that's what Whiskey Makers Reserve is, and I like that. I like that a bit of kind of diversity in the flavor profile and a diversity in the thought process of expression. So
we've got a couple of questions coming through. The first one is going back to the Miramar, just asking for ways to drink it. What would you mix it with?
I think drink it however you like it. I personally prefer, because it has a good balance of tropical fruit and rustic characters. I think a simple highball of Mizuari would do amazing on a nice sunny evening. Just you're getting ready for the dinner or meeting with friends. I love highballs. So a highball, or like we are enjoying right now, neat. Just a few drops of water would be great. But again, that's just how I would drink it. But please drink it the way you like it.
And then we've got another question coming through, and it's about sherry cask Scotch whiskey. Do you have any favorite sherry heavy single malts?
Oh, absolutely. I love a lot of sherry heavy single malts. I think, of course, Macallan, there are some older Macallans that I really appreciate. And those have actually allowed me to go deeper into the sherry cask. So that's why they are very important. I'll always love Macallan. That's why my first love from a sherry cask. I love Glenronach. I also like a good Craigellachie, very old Craigellachie in refill sherry butts or puncheons, sublime. I like Yamazaki sherry cask. So there are a lot of sherry cask whiskies that I absolutely love. And I think you have to appreciate what the others do as well to understand. And you have to find your own style about those sherry casks. So if you look at the Whiskey Makers Reserve from Lakes, it has a different stylistic character to it. So it's not your typical, dry ginger kind of sherry bomb. It has this rich sweetness character to it, and that's probably my signature style of whiskey. But I love a lot of other sherry cask whiskies, and I'm not doing justice because I can name like 50 different ones. But
yes, of course, yeah.
I'm not doing justice by calling just 3 names out. But those are kind of that comes to my mind today.
Yes. Well, that's a kind of interesting question, because it brings me on to another question, which is about English whiskey, and how does English whiskey differentiate itself from what's happening north of the border? How does it have its own identity?
See, I cannot speak for the English whiskey industry as a whole, but I can speak on behalf of Lakes. I mean, as far as Lakes is concerned, from ever since I got here, we have been very clear that our style is very Scotch-like. Yeah, so we might be south of the border, but our style, the process, that what we do is very much Scotch-like. And we personally don't feel that we have to differentiate ourselves. I think ultimate goal as a whiskey maker for myself, or I think I can speak on behalf of our team as well, that our goal is to make very compelling, interesting, and flavorful whiskeys, right? And there are many ways to do that. Sometimes you can, follow a certain framework, follow a certain construct of how whiskey should be, but you have to have your own strokes to it, have your own identity through it. So that's what we believe in. I cannot speak on the behalf of the whiskey industry, but as far as Lakes is concerned, They're very much Scotch-like,
Okay,
but we have
that's really interesting. There's a question about the amazing label on Miramar.
Yeah.
Where does that? Is that Lisbon?
Yeah, so it was inspired by a trip, family trip to Portugal. Yes, it's by an artist Coles, and he created this visual based on the whole idea. So I think it's a complex process, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. The way we work around is for Whiskey Makers Editions, there are no briefs. Okay, so there is no sales team or marketing team coming and telling me, okay, that's a whiskey we need for that market. Whiskey Maker Editions are completely, freedom of creation. So, I have a lot of experiments, as you can see in my studio. There are a lot of experiments going around where I might be finding some interesting casks, very interesting flavor combinations. And all I do is I create different flavor profiles. And once I flavor profiles, you might ask me, how do you create flavor profiles? And that can depend. Sometimes you have an inspiration. You might read a book, or you might visit it. You might be in a place, or you might meet someone. You might have some kind of a memory you want to create. And those are the inspirations that I use to create. And one of the inspirations I said was a trip to Portugal, where I enjoyed the old looking sea, that evening time. And also, personally, Miramar was a restaurant where I had my first whiskey in my life. So I think I wanted to bring together all those things in a very emotional way. And that's how this comes. And when the idea is formed, the prototype is developed. So as you can see here, I've been working on like a couple of prototypes today in the morning. So, I'll work around it once the prototype has been sort of set in stone, where I'm very happy with the flavor character. That's when our marketing director and I will have a long chat. We'll talk about the inspiration, the thought process, idea, and then we'll brief the artist of saying, okay, that's the emotion, that's the inspiration of the thing, and then we let them come up with the artwork, beautiful artwork here as well. So,
do you have any thoughts for what might be the next Whiskey Makers edition?
Oh, yeah. There are some interesting Whiskey Maker editions, some of the most fascinating things. And they are a variety, a spectrum. And that's what I like about the Whiskey Makers editions as well, is you have a spectrum of flavor profiles that are possible through just blending and élevage. You have the same new make spirit, but they are completely different from each other. So we have some interesting releases planned for later this year. So watch the space. But again,
and then I think your internet just went a bit funny just then. I just wanted to ask you one more question, which was about the lakes do blends as well. Can you tell me a little bit about those? There's one called, is it? Oh, I can't remember what it's called. It's called Steel Bonnets, isn't it? Which is the cross border one.
Mm-hmm. So Steel Bonnets is now discontinued, which cross border blend, but the one we do, I don't know if you can see it clearly on my right-hand side here, is the One Blended Whiskey portfolio. So One is a very interesting platform, and I like that because One is not about the whiskeys. But what I thought was, I was a whiskey geek before I became a whiskey maker. And one of the questions that I always had in my head was, okay, what if I put the same liquid in, let's say, port pipes, the same liquid in American oak, same liquid in a PX cask, same liquid in a Manzanilla cask, or same liquid in orange wine cask, or a Moscatel cask, or a Mezcal cask? What would happen? And that's the answer to that. And the whole idea behind that is I have created this blend, and it was the old blend, but which I had reformulated many times. I've tweaked it, and then it's finally tweaked in 2018. And the whole idea was to create a blend that highlights the character of the cask, and just to showcase to the consumer what happens when you have the same new make spirit. So you take all the parameters are the same, The only thing you change is the type of cask and what flavor do you get. And that's the whole idea behind the one blended whiskey. So if you are quite interested in understanding the nuances, okay, what happens when you take the same liquid in PX, orange wine, muscatel, and then probably it's a good way to kind of get into it. Those are very flavorful, easy drinking whiskeys that can be enjoyed on a highball, cocktail, or enjoyed neat. And I call them, they are blend, but they taste more like single malts.
Where are they blends from? From Scotland?
Yeah,
from
so the heart. Yeah, so the heart of the blend is the Lake Single Malt. So Lake Single Malt goes into the heart, and then we have the grain and single malt whiskies from Scotland. Now, as you can imagine, English whiskey industry is in very early stages. We don't have grain distilleries, so we don't have the spectrum of malts available for us to play with. So the best option was to use Scotch and mostly West Coast malts, and it uses grain whiskey from the lowlands and just blended with the Lake Single Malt.
Oh, that's interesting. We've just had someone saying how much they love the orange.
Canvas is the same liquid that goes into all the variants, and all we do is change the casks.
Right. We've just had someone saying that they love the orange cask one, and it's great in a highball.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so refreshing in a highball, especially on a warm, sunny day like today out here in Lake District.
Yeah, we've got another question about visiting the lakes. Are you open for visitors?
Yes, we are open for visitors. Of course, because of the COVID situation last year, we had to kind of close our visitor area. We are back open right now. We have a bistro on site, and we also have tours that go on every half an hour to an hour. So yeah, you can have two different kind of tours. You can have the standard tour takes you through the whole distillery. You can see the production. You can taste the whiskeys. And then there is a much more in-depth tours, which also focuses on different tastings, whether it's chocolate tasting, whether it's different malt tasting.
But you're not ever there to show people around, are you?
I wish I can show everyone else, but I have a lot to do, and I have 7 big warehouses of cask that I have to manage. Manage the distillation. I manage the whiskey operation side of things. So unfortunately, I can't be here, but we have a very capable team, and they do a better job than I do of taking our team through and taking people through the whole distillery and the production process. But we have a very, very big team that takes people through all the process, and you can know more about it. But if you ever visit lakes and if I'm around, please come and say hello, and I would love to meet you.
I think we might have one more question.
Sure.
We've got a question saying, how does this compare? So how does Miramar compare to the other whiskey makers editions?
So Miramar, like I said earlier, all the whiskey maker editions are kind of a creative expressions of blending and élevage. And all I'm looking at is I look at 2 different inspirations of 2 different flavor profiles. So we also had something called Whiskey Makers Edition Kolita, which was our first in the Whiskey Makers Edition. But that was very different. That was blended and created using vintage podcast, Kolita podcast with American oak to create a very different character and flavor profile. This is not about the cask. This is not about the cask. Again, I repeat that. This is more about the élevage. This is more about the blending techniques, how you layer flavors together. And that's how all the whiskey maker editions will be different. Lagute was very light and elegant and restrained. It has very delicate floral nuances. It has a very creamy vanilla character. It was a version. So every single edition is a personal story that I'm trying to tell through the language of whiskey.
Right. So I can't wait to see what you come up with next. I think we'll just leave it there because you've obviously got a lot of work to do. But I just want to say, Dhaval Gandhi, thank you so much for talking to us. And people watching, the Miramar, I'm afraid, is all sold out in record time, but we still have the Sherry Monster, the tamed Sherry Monster. So thank you very much, and we'll do another Instagram live in a week or so.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you very much for supporting us as well. Thank you on behalf of Lakes. Again, thanks.
Thank you for the wonderful whiskey.